What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Lab Talk. We have a few unfamiliar faces on the podcast, but OGs in the program. We have Kyle Lauria, Mike Valerio, and of course, Marc Magliaro. Today, we're going to take some time to talk about off-season training, in-season training, all facets of the game, everything like that. Mags, I'm going to start with you. Talk about why in-season training is so important, right? There's a difference between off-season training and in-season training. Talk about that.
I mean, I think in the off-season, a lot of kids are excited to work out. They see gains that are going to happen. They see themselves getting better, and they're excited to try to make some adjustments and do some things that maybe they learn they need to get better at, right? But once the season starts, a lot of kids forget that they need to still work out. They need to still train some things that they're not good at. And I think they lose sight of those things because it's like, oh, I have practice, I have games, I have practice. But if you're 14, 15, 16, even 17 years old, you have a lot of development left to do. And I think that's where, like, they lose that picture. So, like, you're losing development, but then also, like, if you're not working out, if you're not doing mobility, if you're not doing some type of arm care, if you're not on, like, a throwing routine throughout the week as a pitcher, then you're probably not going to perform your best, and you're going to wonder why. Hey, maybe you're losing some miles per hour, or hey, why aren't you swinging the bat the way you want? It's because you're not doing the little things that you were doing all off season because the game started. And that's my thought on it.
Mike, what do you think? As a guy who deals a lot with strength as well, and all that sort of stuff with conditioning and getting our guys ready in the off season, what's your recommendation for guys going into the season?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just keeping your priorities what they were in the offseason, right? You come into the offseason wanting to get bigger, stronger, faster. And just because you get in this in-season and there's more stuff on your plate in terms of games, more practice, things like that, it shouldn't change what the priority is of still getting stronger, bigger, and faster, because ultimately you get to the back end of the season, right, when the games mean the most, it's when you have to be at the peak of your performance, right? The other way is if, okay, I train all off-season, and then maybe I start in the beginning of the season, but as I play more games, four games a week, 5 games a week, I can't really strength train, but then I'm 2 months in now it's state the state finals or whatever it is, and now I'm weaker, I'm not as fast, I'm not throwing as hard, and ultimately I'm not performing for my team. So it's making sure you're staying on top of your training that you were in the off season, and in season being on a regimented program, make sure we're sprinting 3 times a week, and just prioritizing the same things you did in the off season.
Right. And you got something there?
I mean, I think if you think about professional baseball players that are playing 8 months of the year, they're not skipping 8 months of workouts. They can't, right? They need to retain their weight. They need to retain their speed. They need to retain their size and their strength. They have to be working out, and they're playing every day, right? Plus, they're probably training every day on top of that, right? They have to do that over 8 months. High school players, you can do it over 3 months, 2 months of a season, right? Same for college players, which college programs usually have some type of development or in-season strength programs. But high school players need to understand that, like, it has to be done, because 2 months goes really quick, and you do play a lot of games. And once you get to the tournament part of the season, right, that's where bodies start to break down if you haven't been working out over the last 2 months.
Definitely.
And baseball training is something we'll get into later with hitting and pitching and stuff like that. But I feel like, especially I've run into it dealing with, we deal with amateur athletes, younger guys, even getting into the older college guys and pro guys. You guys, I don't want to lift today. I got a game tomorrow, and I played 2 days ago, and my body's sore.
I don't want to be sore.
Yeah, like I don't want to be sore if I'm pitching in 2 days or something like that, right? As a pitching coach, and as a strength coach, and you guys, what do you think? What's the response to that? Like, how do you get a kid to be like, you know what? I want to get my lift in. I'm not going to be sore. Like, even if I am sore, I'm going to push through that.
I think it really depends on, like, the kid you're talking to. Like, if it's a kid who's 13 to 15 years old, I'm going to tell him, like, you need to keep developing. We need to keep building build the foundation. And I mean, even 16, 17, if they're weak or if they have no base, then yes, that's really important. But, like, I'm a really big believer that baseball is a skill sport, though, too. So, like, I do believe that, like, the strength part is hugely important, but, like, I think that the skill part is really important also. And when I mean in-season training and off-season training, I think in-season too, like when a kid goes to a high school practice, he's doing stuff for the team. He's not getting his individual reps there. Maybe like a bullpen, But like if you need to take ground balls, if you need to take swings, or if you're someone who needs to hit every day, or you have some type of routine, or whether it's do some type of strength work, like those are things that's not happening at your practice. So regardless of what it is, and that's where I think some people forget, like we do talk about like in season and off season, we're talking about strength, but just in general, in development, everything should continue to keep going on, whether it's like your arm care, your mobility, medicine balls, like sprinting, like it maybe you adjust a little bit of something, but I think that you have to keep developing throughout the year. And I think like it's easy to get caught up on one thing, like, oh, I'm going to keep lifting, I'm going to do the skill. Like you got to find a good balance.
Yeah, you got to do it all. I mean, same thing with the skill work. I 100% agree. Like when you go to practice, if you're getting swings in, usually there's an approach, right? It might be game-like, it might be learning how to hit and run, do this, do that, do a job, whatever. But how much focus is on your development still, right? You still need those very, very focused reps where you might need to be alone on a tee. You might need to be with that one buddy that you love to hit with, where you guys can kind of talk shop about what you see in each other's swings. You're not getting that at practice with the team, right? You're not getting the same focus reps. So those still have to happen. Like you still got to go home and do your own work on your own. So the little focus reps, if it's pitching, hitting, even fielding, right? You see going back to pro, like you watch spring training, the guys are doing their individual stuff before their practice even starts. They're doing those like short hops on ground balls. They're doing their tee works with their coach. Right, they're not. Then they'll go on the field and hit as a team and get their live swings. But like that's not their skill work. Like that still has to happen in season. You still got to find time for that.
For sure. I mean, I think both you guys touched on it. Like knowing who's in front of you in terms of who you're actually working with on the skill side, what they need to work on. When maybe it is short hops or something to get themselves going. Training wise, educating the athlete on just doing nothing that day if they're super sore is not going to be the best thing for them, right? Trying to increase blood flow in terms of mobility or something so simple as a low-level workout is going to help with making that soreness go away, not just being like, okay, I understand you're sore, just don't do anything today because that's not going to get us what we want to do, right? In season-wise, they play a lot of games, they're practicing every day, they're doing a lot of running, especially in the beginning of the season, unnecessary running, that's, these miles, 2 miles they have to do conditioning-wise for their team, they're going to be extra sore. So us being in the position that we are as coaches, being able to educate in terms of the different things that they need is going to be important.
I want to talk a little bit about in-season routine. Kyle, you're a little different, right? You're a hitter. We were all pitchers. Talk about your in-season routine as a hitter, right? Mags touched on, you go to practice for reps as a team, right? But now after, right, you got to get your individual work in, I'm sure. You're a very successful hitter at the college level. Talk about what you did to be in that spot.
I think, like, I would get my live swings, my live at-bats, machine work, live BP during practice. But I was really big on feels, like understanding what I need to feel, what feels right, what doesn't feel right. I like to hit alone, right? That just consists of tee work, right? But it was just me understanding what felt right, what didn't feel right. I wasn't big on mechanics. A little bit of video here and there if something felt off, but otherwise it was me, a tee, and a net, right? Very, very, very simple. I'm not even looking at the ball flight. I'm just trying to feel like the ball is coming off my bat flush with backspin. And I would have my practice after school, going to college. So I'd have class, eat, go to practice, do my teamwork, whatever that is, and then I'd go home and hit off a tee. Right? I'd finish every day off with the tee because I need to make sure those fine-tuned muscle human nature movements of a hitter, right, are fine-tuned. That's what I'm looking for. I'm fine-tuning those movements every day. I felt like every day that I didn't hit, right, on a tee with a lot of focus, I got a little bit worse. I didn't come as clean the next day. I wasn't as prepared. So I was very, very, it felt like I was shorting myself if I wasn't able to get to the tee. Some people aren't fans of the tee, and that's fine, and I understand that. But you can't go into a round talking to your buddies, right, in the middle of your swings and expect that you're getting better, right, just by trying to hit a ball in the gap, right? You have to understand what you're feeling so that you can repeat that feel specifically, and then usually the mechanics take care of themselves.
I mean, like, they say, like, the devil's in the detail.
Yeah.
So, like, I think, like, if you're super detailed about your work, like, we watch all the kids who come in here, and if you could point out some kids that are really good, if college season's about to start today, if you look, AJ Gracia, right, he comes in, he has a specific routine that he does every time he comes in here. All right, Ryan Costello. He comes in, and when he hits, there's certain drills that he'll do before he hits. All right, Chris Lavonis, when he would come in here, there's certain things that he'll do arm care-wise. There's certain things that he'll do throwing-wise that he makes sure that he does so he feels good. And I'm sure, like, Mike, you could talk about the strength side, too, of this. Like, there's certain things that someone might have in their strength program that makes them feel good. Like, that's an important part of being successful in this game is, like, we need to feel at our best. Not all the time. It's not always going to be like that. But, like, if we can do things that make us feel better or things that we know are going to prepare us and it's part of our routine, like, that's something that, like, we can't skip. And, like, I'm watching it right now. There's a big leaguer warming up right now here, and he does basically the same routine every time he comes in here before he throws. And that's something that it's not, like, the most flashy thing in the world. It's pretty boring, actually. But it's the consistency of him doing it every day that's going to pay off.
Consistency of the boring stuff. The boring work is what makes you successful.
And it's like what you do when nobody's watching. You know, like that's how it was explained to me.
Yes, the non-flashy part. And what works for me 100%. Might not work for you. It might not work for him. It has to be very personalized. It's not cookie cutter. That goes for anything in baseball, in my opinion, right? Hitting specifically. Like, what works for me is going to be completely different for somebody else. I might think down to the ball, this guy might look to lift it, right? Someone might be looking to hit it oppo every time. Somebody might be looking to pull it. Somebody might need to do this drill. Somebody might need to do this drill. It's very, very specialized, but it's about the hitter finding what works for them. And I see that a lot in lessons is that they'll be like, what do you think's the best drill for me? I'm like, I don't know, but let's work 100%. On finding that together, right? I'm here to help you find that, but I need you to respond to me and tell me, like, that felt good. And I'll be like, what did you feel? Explain it to me. All right, explain it in detail so that you understand what you're talking about and what you actually felt so that you can replicate it, so that you can repeat it, right? And that might be a drill you do for the rest of your life, okay? But you can't look for, like, that one fix-it drill. You have to kind of find it and find a routine that gets you into the place and the position you want to be consistently, because that's the biggest key.
It's like you got to be obsessed.
Yeah.
Like, you almost have to be obsessed with this game a little bit. Like, if you're not obsessed with what you're trying to do or what your plans are or what you're trying to get done in this game, it's hard to get to the level that if you want to play at the highest level possible, like, you sort of got to be a little obsessed. Like, think about our jobs right now, like, for where you're at right now and where you're at and what you guys are doing and what you're doing. Like, in order for us to keep growing, like, we're all obsessed with what we do. Like, we come in here every day and we make this like, it's really not about us. We love doing what we do and things are growing, but, like, it's really, we love helping these kids and we love helping them have a platform to even communicate with. Like, I think that's something that, like, we're really good at here. We're all people that played baseball. We've all gone through the development period where, like, maybe Mike did it different than me, Kyle did it different than him, and that's what Kyle just talked about. But I could tell you one thing is like the amount of, like, countless hours that we probably put on working on something or trying to figure something out. I think those are the things that, like, go unnoticed. Like, and that's where, like, all the good ones who come in here, even, like, in most jobs, like, you have to put the time in to, like, get the reward from it. And just like in life, like, this game is constant adjustments. Like, you might have to change your routine after a little while. It might make you to start doing things that's something you don't want to do. Yeah. You know, but, like, there's definitely real value in creating a routine and just being consistent.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's why this game is the best sport to play, is because the failure rate is so high, and it's basically the same as life, right? You're gonna fail. How can you adjust to then succeed? That's the biggest thing, right? Maybe the routine you once had, your morning routine, whatever it was, is all going awesome. Something gets thrown in a wrench-wise, and then you have to adjust and how you got to do the rest of your day. This is the same thing with baseball. It's like you go 0 for 10. Okay, maybe it's a small adjustment, not a big one. Okay, then the next, you're 10 for 10 the next time. Yeah. Right. So it's about the adjustments we can make in the game, but it's the same thing with life. The adjustments we can make in life to then be successful.
100%.
I agree.
And one thing, Mags, you kind of touched on was, like, kind of not getting complacent, being, consistent with the boring things. And that kind of brought up the word comfortability for me, right? And I've been helping out with some of the relievers at my college, and I've been talking to them more about the mental side of things than anything, but we've been going through physical stuff as well. But one thing, one of the freshmen said to me, he had his first outing. It was at Minute Maid Park in Houston, and first time getting called out of the bullpen, came in like a 1-run game against a top 10 team in the country and like shoved. And we talked about it in the winter a little bit. He came up to me and talked about how he wanted some help, like being a closer, stuff like that. So I was helping him, and it was really cool to see him do well. So I called him and I'm talking to him. I'm like, dude, like you're a stud, man. Like this is awesome. And he's like, you know what? Like everyone keeps telling me that, and now I kind of feel like I'm running into a problem where now I'm getting comfortable, right? And I don't want to feel it, but I feel it coming. And I was like, that's a very mature thing for you to say, because like a kid in your position normally at that age would be like, oh yeah, I'm the man, dude. Like I just shoved. Like I'm killing it. But he's not. He's like, I don't want to feel this way. So what do I do? Yeah. And I basically gave him the advice of, there's a difference between confidence and comfortability, right? Like now you did it. Okay, now it's expected, right? So what did you do to make you have success there, right? And he's like, oh, well, I did, this, that, and the third. I'm like, okay, now master that routine, right? Everything that works for you, you master, right? And now I don't care if you have 10 outings that are good in a row, right? Every time it comes to doing that routine, don't be like, I'm shoving right now. I'm fine. I don't need to do this extra little thing. Yep. It's only 4 seconds. Like, it's only a little stretch. I'll be fine. Like, no, because the minute you get off of that routine
is where you're actually
is where you get is where you get screwed up.
Yep, 100%.
I think
Go ahead.
I think that's what makes the greatest athletes in any sport the greats, is that they never get complacent with, even if they're winning, if they're losing, whatever it is. It's staying neutral and never getting too high, never too low. I mean, Jalen Hurts just won the Super Bowl MVP, and his quote was, "The pain of losing is way worse than the joy of winning." Yeah. Right? So it's like, this guy's at the pinnacle of a sport. The ultimate goal of that, you get into camp.
Everybody's career.
Yes.
From when you're 4 years old.
Exactly. Every goal is to win the championship, right? 100%. And he just did it at the highest level in the NFL. Played an awesome game. They blew out the Chiefs, Super Bowl MVP, and he's just not complacent.
I mean, he's experienced some real diversity too. In college, got booted.
Yep.
And then lost the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So like for him to come back and be able to do that, like, I mean, he's a stud athlete, but he's also a really good person. I think that's another thing that like people don't talk about as much. Like, be who you are. Like, if you're someone who's in a good mood when you're doing well, if you have a bad game, like, it's okay to get upset, but like they can't change your whole demeanor.
Yeah.
Like,
or hurt others.
And like I think it's also one of those things too that like when you start to like play the game at the highest levels and you start to experience other people that can play the game, like at 16, 17 years old, when you start to go to these tournaments, some of these kids experience failure for the first time. Yep. And it's one of those things that, like, unless you've been through it, it's hard to walk a kid through that sometimes, like, because there's times where like anything physical you tell them is not going to help them. Like, you could tell them anything that's going on with their swing is not helping them right there. Like, and that's where I think like the value that we can add being coaches that have been through that is just something that's like, I mean, there's not a price tag on that.
Yeah.
Like,
and talking about like the value, adding it to the kid's life is like, I want to teach kids what I learned too late, right? Yeah. I felt like it was too late.
For sure.
It wasn't, but I wish I could have learned it earlier. And I tell kids all the time, like, if you can start learning about your sleep, if you can start learning about your diet, if you can start doing a lot of those little things earlier, you're going to start maximizing your game to the highest potential a little earlier. Right, but I relate really well to like those younger freshmen and 8th graders that are a little undersized, because I was at that time. And I was talking to somebody yesterday. I'm like, dude, if you can stick to the work ethic, learn how to work hard and compete when it's difficult, when you grow and develop, the game feels easier, right? But you have to get through the tough times, all right? Because when it's easy, it's easy. When you're the biggest kid on the field at 8th grade, freshman, it's easy. That's what builds complacency, like you were talking about. But when it's difficult at that age and you learn how to push through, right? You go from maybe 12U being the 3 or 4 hitter, right? The field grows, everybody starts to grow. You don't, right? And you can push through being that 9-hole hitter again, right? Finding a way to bunt, do a job, be a team player. You learn how to play baseball the right way. You know how to work hard when things are hard. You know how to stick to the plan when you know that your back's against the wall because everybody's growing, everybody's getting bigger, and you're just not there yet.
And that goes back to what Mike was saying too, when, we get into these positions where it's like, I was the 3 hitter, I was the 4 hitter, right? I'm the man, and now I'm the 9 hitter. That's like throwing a wrench in your plan, kind of, right? Like, I'm supposed to be this big type of power hitter, Now I'm the 9 hitter. Hey, how do I adjust, right, and now have success in this position? How do I be the best 9 hitter, right? How do I turn that around? Kyle, you touched a little bit about nutrition and sleep, just kind of threw it in there. Mike, that's something you've been really high on. Let's talk about that a little bit. Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the talk that coaches have is about what can we do physically, right, to get stronger in season, this, that, whatever. But the nutrition side is something that I feel kids, I would say middle school, high school years don't really focus on, right? Unless you're immersed in it, unless you have someone continuing to tell you, okay, this is how we should do it, this is how we do it, right? They're not really mindful of what our protein intake should be that day, right? How much sleep am I getting at night, right? Those things are almost more important than what we're going to do strength-wise, because that's what's going to drive, right, the strength numbers going up, or my velocity going up, or my bat speed, how hard the ball comes off my bat, right? The nutrition and sleep is what's driving that. Now, if those things are down, are we going to get a result that might be good? Yeah, it could be, right? Depending on the kid. Kids are very skillful. They get into positions, they can get in, whatever it is. But if we match that with really good nutrition, right, and really good sleep, then who knows what the outcome could be, right? So it's educating these kids on, okay, our protein intake per day should be this, right? Our sleep number per day should be this, okay? Our carb intake should be this, okay? What time should we eat if if it's a kid that wants to gain weight, right? It's not waking up, not having breakfast, right? Waiting till 12 o'clock to have lunch, and then I try to cram meals in for the rest of the day. It's building an actual plan for, okay, I wake up at 7, I have breakfast, right? Now, a couple hours later at 10 o'clock, I have a snack. I have lunch at 12. It's building this consistent schedule. We talk about consistency. That's the biggest thing with anything that we're doing. It's building a consistent schedule throughout the day that you're focused on, not just your strength, not just your school, right? Also throwing in the nutrition and a scheduled plan on when we're supposed to eat to get the ultimate outcome of getting better at sport or whatever we're trying to get better at.
So I get the question a lot. Not the question, I get the excuse a lot. I don't have time. How do you respond to that?
So it's the conversation of, okay, how important is it to you, right? The saying is, if it's important to you, get it done no matter what. So if gaining weight, right, is important to the athlete, they know that's going to help elevate their game. Okay, now you're telling me you don't have time. How important is it to you, right? Do you want to play at a Division I level? Do you want to play in the bigs? Like, what is the ultimate goal, and what are you driving for? You're doing all this hitting, all this strength, but the ultimate stopper is the weight, right? Gaining weight is easy. You eat more than you burn. That's the only thing to it, right? If you're not eating enough, you're not going to gain weight. So if you're telling me that I don't have time, that it's not important to you, and that's that's the conversation I'm going to have with the kid. And it goes into how you can talk to someone, like we touched on, like who's the athlete in front of you, and building a relationship with that kid to have that honest conversation of, hey, like, you're telling me this.
Where's your priorities?
Where's your priorities at? You want this. This is how you're doing it. As coaches, we're in a position of saying, guiding kids on this is how it's going to get done, but you're not doing it.
I also think, like you said, when you said, like, everyone thinks physical when it comes to like throwing harder and stuff like that. But I think that's a good point. Like, in season, if someone's not focused on, like, especially during season, having practice right after school, like, if they're not focused or have some type of routine to eat, right, or have some type of routine, like, hey, I have to make sure I'm sleeping and getting some sleep in with having school and then going straight to high school practice, right? And then if you have to work out after that or do some type of arm care, like, that's where, like, people go instantly, like, oh, well, instantly to their mechanics.
Yep.
It's most of the time it's probably not going to be that. It's going to be like, hey, maybe I'm down 7 pounds, so I'm not creating the same amount of force, or like, hey, I'm not hydrated, so I'm also down weight. Like, those could be two simple things. And then it also comes to where we also do talk about, like, training, but like the movement quality. Like, if you're tired and your body feels like crap, like, you're not going to move good. Like, like, so, like, that's where, like, people go instantly to, like, oh, like, I feel like I'm flying open, so can I do drills? No, like, that's, like, it's more of, like, do you have the same range of motion in your hips that you had at the beginning of the year?
You're just not focused.
Is your shoulder working?
What time did you go to sleep last night?
Is your shoulder working the same way it did at the beginning of the year? Are you taking care of your body the same way you were when you were training? And most of the time the answer is no, because it's like, oh, I don't have time because I have games. And it's like one of those, it's not that important to them then.
100%.
And as a trainer, like, like, the way things are going now, like, it's more realistic to be able to have that talk with a parent. Like, because if they're going to take it that serious, their kids want to, like, it's a talk that there's credibility behind it, and you can have that talk.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Definitely.
I think Fazio, I made a graph the other day. I'll send it to you. You can maybe post it in one of these. And it talks about, like, in-season training. And it talks about, like, if you were to go for 9 weeks and have 2 workouts a week, and it had, like, a graph of, like, hours spent working out and then not work out, and then it was, like, baseline. It was, like, a streamline, you know? So, like, but that's the same thing for anything. Like, if you were to add up, hey, sleeping 8 hours a night compared to 6 hours a night, and you added that up over a week, that's 10 hours right there, you know? So over a course of a season, athlete A is going to get hundreds of hours more sleep than, or maybe like 100 hours more sleep than athlete B.
Yeah, and it's a recovery. It's the everyday recovery.
Same thing with eating. Like the guy who wakes up and eats breakfast every single day compared to the guy who does it 3 days a week because he says he doesn't have time, is going to keep his weight on, or hey, maybe even gain 3 pounds during the season than the kid who loses 7 and wonders why his velo's down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on Tuesday I did a Zoom call with my nutritional coaching clients, and we were talking about sleep. And I pulled a video from a Joe Rogan podcast with Matthew Walker. Matthew Walker is a neuroscientist who focuses on sleep. Right? He wrote a book called Why We Sleep, and basically he's giving all these statistics about when you have this amount of sleep, this amount of sleep. And one of the things he said was your injury rate goes up 60% with 6 or less hours of sleep. So now he continued to talk on the podcast about how something so simple as they did a study. It took 2 people, right? They both balanced on a Bocce ball, right? One person slept, let's say, over 7 hours. The other person slept under. And over a week span, they continued to monitor how the person was balancing on the ball. And what they noticed was the person that was less than 7 hours was wobbling more, right? Their balance was off. Their focus was off. So as Max was touching about kids coming in here and saying, hey, my arm's laid or my front side's flying open, right? Your level of focus, depending on how much you slept, is going to be down based off of, you know, what you did the night before. So could it be a mechanical thing? Maybe, right? But if I slept 5 hours and I'm coming in to do some pitching stuff with Mags, probably at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, because you go to practice, you have school, then you go to practice. I slept 5 hours. Now I'm trying to be very intricate with what I'm doing in terms of focusing on my front side. If it's my arm up or my front hits, like front foot hits, but I'm just not focused, right? I don't have sleep. It's 7 o'clock. I've done school. I have practice. I have homework. I have all these things, all these stressors. And now I'm trying to be focused, but I can't focus because I've only had 5 hours of sleep. So that goes back to like how important is your pitching lesson at that time, important in terms of how you're doing in that season.
Think about it from a hitting perspective. You get milliseconds
Yeah.
to react, read the pitch, ball or strike, fastball, curveball, changeup, slider, whatever it is. You have to make all of those decisions within milliseconds. That little bit of difference in your focus or even your vision or whatever, that little impairment is the difference between a hit and an out.
100%.
Like that little itty bit is just a huge difference between hitting the bottom of the ball or squaring up the baseball.
And I think you have to look at baseball as like long term. It's a different sport than most sports. College baseball, even high school, you play way more games than most other sports. So like you have to think long term and consistency with everything that you're doing. Like a lot of kids come in and we see it. They'll come in for a month and a half, 2 months, and be like, wow, I'm throwing 4 miles an hour harder, I'm running faster, I'm stronger. And then they disappear because they think like, oh, I have it.
Yeah, they
Or
made
it's the
that little
same thing
jump
during
and
the
they're like, oh, I'm
season.
good.
They're like, oh, I got this, like it's there. And then all of a sudden you see them 3 months from now and they're throwing the same exact speed or less
Yep.
because they haven't trained.
Yep.
And I think that's one of those things that like baseball is the long game.
Yep.
Like if you're 88 as a freshman in high school and you're still throwing 88 as a junior, you're doing something wrong. Like that's what like we've really been preaching. Like our kids, we have had some success this winter, but like with kids throwing hard. But the main goal has been like, hey, we want to be able to throw hard when it's our time to throw hard.
Yeah.
Right? And that's like long term. Like, and for these kids, like it's much better off for them and development because they're more into learning about how to, not like let me just rip the ball.
Yeah.
And I think it's showing in both things. Like same thing in lifting. Like when you have a kid who's a freshman or in 8th grade, like they don't have to start trying to like deadlift the most right now. Like we're trying to teach them like
Foundation.
how to do things the
Movement
right way.
qualities.
Like we want to make them like basically like their own coach. Like and I know that's crazy to say as a freshman in high school, but we want them to be super into what they're doing.
Yeah, very self-aware.
Because that's how, like, if you watch all the kids, you said it, aware. If you watch all the guys who come in here, when they're doing what they're good at, if it's pitching, if it's running, if it's hitting, they are very aware of what they're doing. And I think that's like a really big part of developing, is understanding what you're doing. And that's where, like, most of the people who come in here who develop, who throw, we videotape them throwing, and they videotape themselves, and they just feedback to it. That's how you get better. Just like in anything else you do. When you work out, the weights are your feedback. When you run, the timing's your feedback. When you throw, the result is your feedback. But like when you're training, what you're doing, and if you videotape it, and the numbers is your feedback.
Yeah.
And that's how you get better. So if you're not looking at that stuff in the off season, it's hard to develop.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that goes back to, I think, of the word complacency. It's like you have that freshman that's throwing 88, right? And then as a junior, he's throwing 88 still, or whatever it is. It's because he gets so much praise as a freshman, right? He's like, oh, you're the top 1% of your class. You're throwing 88. You're doing this. But as coaches, in terms of the position that we're in, we're obviously want to see that awesome result, and that's great. You see the hard work they put in, and they get the exit velo number, they get the throwing velocity number, they get the weight number, whatever it is, that's great. But our job is to continue to be like, okay, this is awesome, but looking ahead, we have to continue to get better, not just stay at 88 as now a junior, as a senior, and your position is different. Now you're at the top 1% at freshman. Now you're junior, senior, and you have kids that weren't throwing as hard as freshmen. Now they're surpassing you as juniors because you got complacent because you thought you were good enough when you were a freshman.
And I think there's ways that you have to find as a coach to incentivize or get kids to get into other things than velocity. And I think, like, if a kid is doing that, like, if you're throwing 88 and you start to throw harder as a freshman, good for you. But, like, if you're 88 as a freshman, it shouldn't be your main focus to throw harder. Like, you should work on pitching. What, like, how am I moving? And if there's little things that you can work on and it makes you throw harder, so be it. But, like, I think the game of baseball, especially throwing, is the long-term game.
Yeah.
Like, learning how to move the right way, learning how to take care of your arm.
How to compete.
How to compete is a huge thing. A lot of kids I see, I call them, like, lab throwers. Like, they come in, they're really good in the lab, and then the second they get on the mound, it's like everything they do, or they don't have a plan, or they're just scared. It looks like they're not prepared, which some of them are. Some of them are some of the hardest workers I know. But the second and that's when we talk about the mental part. And I think, like, that'll be for another day. We could chop that up. But I think that's a whole another topic itself. But I think when it comes to training, the in-season and the off-season, you got to focus on certain things. But there's got to be consistency throughout the whole thing.
So,
Consistency and focus.
Yep.
2 key words.
I feel like those words were brought up a lot in this conversation, and I think one word that
And discipline.
And one word that I kind of want to throw out to end this is controllable, right? We hear a lot about, control the controllables. Everything that we've talked about is controllable. It just comes down to, like Mike said, how bad do you want it, right? Do you want to gain weight? Make time, right? Do you want to be a better hitter? Make time, right? Do you want to throw harder, throw more strikes, whatever it may be? Make time, right? These are all controllable things. You move around your schedule, right? You have to prioritize things, and I think that's something, like you said, we can get into another time because there's so much to get into with that. But it's all about prioritizing and
like I said, like, discipline. Like, I think, like, there's going to be times you don't want to wake up and go do that workout or do that mobility where you're not going to wake up.
You already had your practice and you got to show up again. You got to do your
or
work.
There's going to be that day you get home late and you don't want to eat that extra meal, or there's going to be that day you just gave up 3 runs and after the game you're supposed to do arm care and you're not in a good mood and you're like, screw this arm care. Like, the discipline part is going to make you do things when you don't want to, and that's a big part too, because there's going to be days where your body doesn't feel good and you need to do what you need to do, and, like, that's not fun. Like, I'm not going to say it's fun, but that's where, like, you being determined, focused, and having discipline, those moments, usually if you could get through those, there's good moments that happen after those,
Definitely.
It's not allowing your emotions to control what you're actually going to do in your output.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a bad outing, you don't do good hitting that day, whatever it is, your emotions and feelings are going to be a certain type of way, right? You may feel, I put all this hard work in the off season, and it's my first weekend, playing, and I go 0 for 8 or 0 for 9, whatever it is, but just because the result is one thing doesn't mean that your process wasn't good, right? Because you got to continue on with your process. Baseball's a hard game, and how you bounce back from the failures is ultimately how the bigs are in the bigs, right? That's the biggest thing.
100%. Love it.
That's it.
Guys, thanks for hopping on. I hope our viewers learned a lot about the in-season training, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Focus.
Came here to conquer, popping the rocket, you know how I launch it. Funny you laugh and making this money I bag, and know how I'm gully, I'm blasting.